Good morning, moms. My name is Elizabeth Green, and this morning I want to share with you a fun way of learning that you probably haven't used before in your schooling. Maybe you didn't even grow up learning this way, but it is a fun way to create curiosity for your students, your kids at home, and it also is pretty easy to do. So when you learned in school, you probably learned in silos. Now, what on earth does that even mean? Let me show you. Probably, this is how I learned. Probably you went to school and you went to class and you went to English class. And then after English, you put those books away and you went to science. And after you finished science, you put those books away and you went to social studies. After you put those books away, you went to the next class. And if you're lucky, you got to go to art even, and PE and some of those other things. But you learned in silos. And so things didn't necessarily connect. When you studied English, it didn't necessarily connect with what you were learning in history or social studies or science. None of the things connected together. You went and learned in what we call silos. I want to teach you something that you can do, and it's called integrative learning, where all the subjects can connect together and they inform one another, and it really makes learning fun and it helps produce good thinkers. Now, isn't that the point of education? We want our kids to be connecting the dots. We want them to be really good thinkers where they can apply what they learned in one subject to the other subject. And so how do you do it? Well, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to show you how to do it. And I'm going to use an example that we used earlier in the week. We talked about going on a nature hunt. And we talked about going out and maybe looking for flowers that are blooming in your area. It's spring in our area. Daffodils are the flower in bloom right now. And so perhaps you go out and you're looking on a nature hunt and you're looking for daffodils. You can pick any flower, but that's the one I'm choosing. And so maybe in what you do for science is you look at the parts of the flower. Now, it's very easy. If you go and do Google for parts of the flower, you'll be able to find a worksheet for preschool, elementary, like any age group. And so you might want to do that, find the parts of the flower, and let the kids learn a little bit about the parts of the flower, the petal, the pistil, the stamen, the anther, the sepal. And they can look at those parts of the flower, and maybe you connect that then with their PE. Then you go out, and as you've looked at that on a piece of paper, as you've looked at that, and you've been identifying them in your science worksheet, then when you go out and you actually look at the flower, get really close and see, petals are easy to find, but can we find what the anther is? Can we find out what the stamen is? Where are the pistils? And look for those parts of the flower. And that way you're not just doing it on a piece of paper, but you're doing it in real life. So that's science, right? You've done science. You're looking at the parts of the flower. Maybe you're memorizing them. You're talking about them. You're identifying them as a scientist would. All right, well, now we're going to put away our science and we're going to go to literature. But what should we do for writing and reading and literature? Well, here's some ideas. Keeping with the flower theme, why don't you write a haiku about the flower that you just looked at? So a haiku is basically, if you remember back from school, it's 5 syllables in the first line, 7 in the second line, and then 5 again in the third line. So it's a chance for you to teach your kids what syllables are. And then maybe you write a haiku about a daffodil. So I was walking the other day thinking about this, and I came back and I quickly wrote down what I was thinking about. So here's my haiku, but your kids are going to come up with their own, and it will be fun. I mean, it might be fun, it might be silly, but everyone's going to have a different one, and that's going to be fun. Write down what your haiku is, and then stand up and share it, and that gives some public speaking skills. You can add those in too. So what I wrote is I wrote daffodils cheer me. I wrote golden hood and emerald stalk signals spring has sprung, or spring has come. So you can play with words, you can play with the wording and the sound and trying to find a better, richer word once you write things down. So you can play with words, play with language, play with the beauty. Education is all about discovering the beauty in the world around us, the beauty of the written word, the beauty of the word as it rolls off the tongue. So play with that. Okay, so then you move on to literature. Maybe you read the poem by A.A. Milne. Remember A.A. Milne wrote Winnie the Pooh. So maybe you read a poem that I put in the group already about a daffodil, Daffodil Dilly. Older students maybe want to do a little research about A.A. Milne. When did he write this poem? What else did he write? What book can you find it in? What other poems did he write? So older students might want to get a little bit more context, but for the very young ones, just enjoy the poem. Learn the poem, print it out, say it together, say it when you go on your hunt for daffodils, and memorize the poem. And you don't even have to work that hard memorizing it. Young kids memorize so quickly when you repeat it every single day, repeat it a couple times a day. And you will act it out as you repeat it and as you say it. And the things that they say, they hear, and they do, they will remember very quickly with a little repetition. So you've got some literature, and see, we've kept this theme all going together. Now let's move on to faith and music. How could our faith be incorporated into this? Well, there is a wonderful song called, and it's also a poem. Many of the old hymns are poems that were put to music, and it's called "This Is My Father's World." And so that might be a fun thing to do together, is find it on Spotify. I'm certain you would be able to find it on Spotify. And I'm just going to read one of the verses. Probably many of you know this before. It was also those golden books that were put out many years ago also had this poem in the form of a golden book, and it was beautiful. You could look that up, see if you could find that at your library once they open. But here's this, the second verse said, "This is my Father's world. The birds their carols raise. The morning light, the lily white, declare their maker's praise." So there you've got a flower, right? The lily. And then you could just talk about, well, how does the world declare God's praise? You could look at Psalm 19, "The heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands." How can you think, what other things can you think about? What other passages of scripture or Psalms talk about how nature praises God? And what way does nature praise God? This is my Father's world. How is it his world? He's the creator of it. He shines in all that's fair. In the rustling grass, I hear him pass. He speaks to me everywhere. How does God speak to you through the world that is his, that he created? So this poem has a great verses, and you can just ask questions about that. One of the verses talks about how it's comforting to him that he's the ruler of the world. We're in this time of coronavirus. How is it comforting to you that God, who created the heavens and the earth, the beauty of the flowers, how is it comforting to you that he created it all? These are really great conversations. And look, it started out by just looking at the parts of a flower. And here we're getting into creation and comfort. And you know what we're also doing? We're nurturing our souls. We may have fear, we may have worry, we may have anxiety as the news is on and the virus spreads. But our souls, when we focus on God and his omnipotent power and his omniscience, he sees what's going on, to know that he created the world, he created the little flower, and he cares for us. We could go to Matthew 6 and we could open it up and we could talk about, do not worry about your life, what you should eat or drink, or your body, what you should wear. And you know, God made the lilies of the field, and he cares about you. So we can begin to inform the things we're learning by looking at my Father's world, by looking at Matthew chapter 6. What else could we do? What else could come to mind? What other songs could we bring to this that would inform our faith? And then we can bring in music in, because why not sing the songs that we think about and bring that music in to us? And you could pull in PE and you can pull in art. Maybe you run to the daffodil, you do relay race and you run back and forth to the daffodils. Maybe you can draw the daffodil. Maybe you draw it with pencils. Maybe you sketch it. Maybe you do it with crayons or paint. And here you've pulled everything together. Math, you could probably pull in a fun math game as well. But my point is, what have you done? In a sense, you've put God in the center of the learning. You've discovered his world, and you're relating science to writing, and you're relating science to music. And all of a sudden, your learning is integrated. Everything is informing. These other things all relate together. And they all also, in many ways, point back to God. What can we learn about God from this world? He created it. He creates beauty. And he created the written word, the verbal. I mean, all of these things you can see relate together. And it gives you a chance to produce good thinkers because we can contemplate rich thoughts. We can cultivate very interesting conversations, and we can nurture a soul. And so I would just ask you, how do you relate to this? What do you think? Have you ever tried learning like this before? And would you try something like this? If you would, I'd love to help you. And if you think I'd love to do it, but I don't quite know how, give me another example. Let me know you want to learn, and I will give you another example of how to do it.